My guest today is Paulette Perhach, a
Oh,
writing
it's
coach.
sorry, it's Perhach.
My guest today is Paulette Perhach. She's a writing coach who actually we've been mutual followers for a little while on social media, and it's always been interesting to other people and somewhat to me because I've taught feature writing, I've taught travel writing, I've taught continuing education writing to adults. I've taught after school writing as a club or class to like fifth and sixth graders. Um, to what degree writing can even be taught? How much of it is inborn or innate or instinctive or natural? Instinctive, not the word I'm looking for, but natural. And also what methodologies people use. I've always been a proponent or a believer, probably because of the reason I wanted to write in the first place when I was small, in the importance and the amount to which, how much and how widely and how many genres a person reads informs not necessarily the quality of their writing, because some people read a lot and they won't be able to communicate the same way their thoughts themselves, but it does give you a different sense of like language, vocab, phrasing, um, transitions and continuity, opens and closes and things like that, because you've seen more examples and better examples. So I'm going to begin with this question, basically doing this part in case I don't give an intro in YouTube. And I think some of the biographical information about my guests might come up organically, or as they say, in passing. First of all, Paulette, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
My first question of you, to give the audience some background, is what inspired you to teach, or if you prefer the word coach, writing?
Yeah, so my mom was an elementary school teacher, and I didn't think I was a teacher because I'm not a like children in large groups kind of person. But then I joined Peace Corps in my 20s, and I realized in Peace Corps we were there as teachers, and I got 3 months of training from Peace Corps in adult education, and really fell in love with that. So when I came back, I realized that I wanted to make that a part of my life. I just really love helping people, especially people who have always wanted to write and have dedicated their lives to a career or a family and are like coming back to it. I love helping them feel welcomed in that space and that they are allowed to be writers, and that that's something that they can do. I think people feel, and this is where the coaching part comes in. I teach and I coach. The coaching part is so often about the mindset and the emotions behind it and helping people understand where they're putting themselves in a box.
When you were interested in doing that, in your origin story of pursuing it, did you originally have in your mind the ways in which you wanted to do it, or the formats or arrangements in which you wanted to do it, or was that something that's kind of changed over the years? Did you want to do it in a conventional classroom? Did you want to do it face to face? Did you want to do it through like an online? What was the genesis of how you wanted to implement the information?
Yeah, well, I think, seeing all the bureaucracy and other BS that my mom had to deal with as a traditional teacher, I really didn't want to do it in a traditional format. Sometimes I wonder about that. Like, I actually just brought that up to my friend. I'm like, oh, sometimes I wonder if I should have been like a college professor. And she's like, Paulette is a college professor. That doesn't really fit. I'm like, you're right. For example, I did a podcast in Peace Corps to teach the indigenous language of Paraguay, Guarani, and they were going to make it the official part of Peace Corps curriculum, but they said like, oh, some of your jokes in here are too inappropriate to make it official. So I've always loved to do things with my own style, and I think the way that I've come to coach people has evolved by seeing what they need. So for example, during COVID, I started an online writing group where we get together every weekday morning, and I lead a meditation and we write together for 45 minutes. And that started from the extreme conditions of loneliness and mental, chaos that was the lockdown, but it's really continued to serve people. And so that's been going on now for 4 years.
It's interesting how many things that germinated during that period are sustainable or sort of natural if you think about them. They actually make more sense than like people gravitated toward them because they didn't have many choices and they were locked down. And some of these things are like, yeah, but these were actually good ideas whether people were stuck indoors or not.
Totally. Yeah, I really agree. There's been a lot of cool um, communities to come out of COVID. So, I recently started something called the Finishing School for Writers, and that came out of seeing how much writers need accountability. And so, not just saying, okay, you're going to turn in work once a week, but we're also going to have time for questions and answers and working on pitches and, filling out your Writer's Mission Control Center, which is the software I have for writers to stay organized. And so, it's just continually being in conversation with my students about what they need and then designing around that.
That's a very astute and thoughtful approach to conveying instructional information, is to let it evolve based on what you're observing as the needs are, rather than say, this is the curriculum, I've taught 6th grade math or 9th grade social studies this way for 4 or 5 years. I've tweaked it a little bit, and I've adjusted it to like classroom year and stuff like that. But in general, it's the same printout that I've gone by since I started teaching it. That's kind of, there's nothing wrong with that. I guess in a public school system, and maybe private, it's okay. I'm not judging it. But I think you notice stuff over the years, even if you're coaching a sport, that's like, yeah, but when I teach basketball rebounding that way, people don't seem to, maybe because I'm taller, or maybe because they're not the same age, and let me see if this is more effective. That's great. Let's address probably not the best, the metaphor doesn't fit the profession, but let's address the elephant in the room. To what degree can writing be taught in terms of the contrast between innate skills or the lack thereof, and then the student audience or student base? What given a range of people that either opt into a class or don't have any choice but to take a class or are majoring in something, to what degree, let's say the baseline is some of the people that are not born the most linguistic, and I'm not talking about somebody not having an aptitude for anything. These people are bright, but they're not necessarily really, really linguistically bright. Like on a standard aptitude test, their linguistics wouldn't test as high as somebody that's like off the charts. So to what degree can writing be taught?
Yeah, I think craft can certainly be taught, and in a way that helps you form a natural talent. So I'll tell you a story about my own dealing with talent. I have always wanted to play an instrument. A lot of my friends are musical. I took guitar in high school. I tried again. I've taken trumpet lessons, and most recently I took piano lessons, and I was like, I really want to play the piano, and I really put a lot of effort into it. But I realized that in between my lessons, it was almost like what I had learned would just go back to zero. And I just had to say, I love this so much. I want to be that Tori Amos on the piano, and I had to say, this is someone else's talent, and I just have to enjoy the talent of someone else. Now, I could have just tried to brute force do it, and I did that, for example, with learning a second language. When I learned Spanish, I do not have the mind for languages. I wish I did. I adore language and admire people who speak, 4 or 5 languages. And I had to do that because I lived in South America, and I'm so glad I did. I love speaking Spanish.
Yeah.
But
It's me the same. I taught myself with Univision and Telemundo,
wow,
Spanish radio and things like that before
yeah.
the
So what I love is that almost every writer out there has a story about someone who told them they didn't have any talent and they should stop.
Okay.
So we are all free from the need to label people as talented or not. I do
Mm-hmm.
think an innate talent will help you, and that we should all focus on the places where we are talented already. And
Mm-hmm.
education can certainly take you to another level. I think it's essential. I'm always learning, always studying. I took a class at Hugo House, and the student who came in and sat next to me was Maria Semple. And I was like, what is Maria Semple doing in this seat in this class instead of teaching it? And I was like, oh, I get it. When she's always learning. That's why she's such an incredible writer. So that was
Yeah.
a great lesson for me. So I don't really feel it's my place as the writing coach to
Mm-hmm.
say you are talented, you're not talented. I do think that every student has to address their own level of like, is this just for fun and I want to get better and I know that I don't think this is my talent but I want to play with this, or do they want to be
Yeah.
like, I think what I see most often is people not thinking they have talent when they really do. I think that
Oh,
if you are
really?
called to something,
Uh-huh.
you know you have a talent. And it's like with singing, I love to sing, no
Mm-hmm.
talent. So I sing in my car, I sing in the shower, I sing. I just
Mm-hmm.
don't take it out to the world. Nobody has
Right.
to know,
Right.
right? So there's a lot there, and I've thought about taking lessons just to get better for karaoke for myself.
Yeah,
Um,
you try to max even if you don't have a strong inborn gift or zen or something. Sometimes you try to max it just for fun. Like I just want to play tennis with my friends and at the country club or something. I just want to be able to play guitar like recreation.
yeah, yeah, use recreation. So yes, I think talent makes a difference, and yes, I think writing can be taught to improve whatever level you're coming in at.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I've always wondered, even with my um, relatively limited experience having done it, but I've done it with adults and children. Um, and then I think about myself when I was small, and I think about classmates of mine that didn't like to read that much and didn't like to have be assigned book reports, and I like to be assigned them. They didn't like this.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't like research, and I liked research. I'm thinking of some of it, and some of that is like interest level, not gift,
Mm-hmm.
because it's schoolwork. And schoolwork is like, and what courses I liked and what courses I didn't like. And I think I agree with you, um, but I'm learning from you more about not basing it on. I'm learning more. I'm learning from talking to you about it that it's meet people where they are more than like, oh, of these 11 people I have this semester in a continuing ed writing course, 3 of these people I can tell them how to pitch and how to write a cover letter. I can tell them about openings and closings and transitions and stuff like that. But 3 of these people, even after we get through these 6 or 8 weeks, they're not going to be able to sell anything because they're not going to still be stronger just by birth. But that's not. If they have an expertise that they could really, because when I taught people to write, some of the people, because it was based in like metropolitan DC, some of the people wanted to write things that were kind of for their job. And so I didn't discourage that because if if you have a background in something, sometimes you don't have to be able to write creatively about it. You're just doing like something for an alumni magazine or something for a professional for the newsletter of the profession that you work in. That doesn't have to be like story transitions. You can get better.
Yeah, absolutely.
How has coaching writing, and you've already addressed some of this, how has coaching writing improved and informed, well, no, not specifically this, it's about, you said this about students, this is more about you. How has coaching writing improved and informed your own? And when I say work, I mean writing, not teaching it.
Yeah, I love to be in the love of it. with my students, to keep coming back to the joy. And it's almost like going to church together. Um, and so when I am writing, it helps to cement it for me, the things that I say to my coaching students. I hear them for myself more as I'm writing. And I think it also sets up a standard. It pushes me to live my values, the things that I say to my students. And so it makes it a lot easier to feel like a hypocrite if I'm not doing the work. Um,
So for your church analogy, it's like a practice what you preach.
yes, exactly. Yeah, and so the thing that I love about teaching and even writing, especially like nonfiction journalism style, is how much you yourself get to learn. Um, it is like for lack of a better metaphor, like the tip of the iceberg is what appears in my classes, is what appears in my articles, and then you yourself get to learn so much. So it's just being a conduit for the wisdom and the craft and the art. And I actually just went to a conference last weekend and we did a writing exercise, and I was like visited by the muse, or I got in the flow, and we just did a little 5-minute thing, and man, I felt it. I felt the loving what was coming out of, coming from my hand into my notebook. And so just kind of focusing on those moments, and I think in pointing other people and pointing the way for other people, I'm always pointing the way for myself.
Yeah, when you reverse engineer something, it makes you think about your own process more than if you have to relate it to another person.
Mm-hmm.
Do you teach writers how to find outlets for their work?
Absolutely. There's so many ways to do that, and I think it's really important. We're so lucky now. It was not like this when I started. Everything is so much more transparent than it was when I started. And so, just really not only reading the publications you want to be in, but using technology and, our access through social media and the internet to find similar publications that, if you have that dream publication, what's like 2 steps down, like a place you can start. And so helping people kind of figure out what is a path there. What's the first place I can get published if I want to write about, travel, rather than going straight for travel and leisure, what are the levels? And so I kind of have like a low, medium, high model where I say you should be reading all 3 of these publications with the dream of getting to travel and leisure. Let's start with, your local regional magazine.
Exactly. Can a writing coach teach all or a bunch of or several genres?
I definitely don't. I want to feel like, with a coach, I've heard it described as like you want someone who is 10 miles down the road, or who has been 10 miles down the road and can come back and say, okay, here's what it's going to be like, or here's where you're headed. And if someone came to me and they had, a book of poetry, I haven't been down that road, so I can't help them with that. So I want to coach things in which I feel like I've sacrificed a good bit of my life to create some traction and achieve things, and I mostly feel that way in nonfiction and personal essay especially.
So because of your response, I'm imagining that you have to tailor the title and content and structure and material of your, I'm going to use this term again for lack of a better term, classes or offerings to be relatively specific. It can't be like they're called. They can't be but so general based on what you just said.
Yes, yeah. I try to keep it fairly specific, but I mean, I do also really focus on the accountability structures to get work done, and in that structure, that one is not genre specific. The things that I advise people to do could apply to a lot of different genres.
understood. I want to really thank you for your time, and I'm learning a lot, and I hope people are able to take away some guides from this about some of their own aspirations as it stays online and is archived. I will share it on certain platforms. How pivotal to the learning process of effective writing is reading?
It's essential. I don't think I made this up. I think this is something I heard, that reading is the inhale and writing is the exhale. And whenever I'm stuck, reading gets me unstuck, you know? So reading is seeing what's possible and finding your people and finding your place. And I have on my calendar a quote during my scheduled reading time. I have a quote from R.O. Kwan that says, "If I'm not reading, the work suffers."
Yeah.
So it's not just like, oh, this is a bonus. It's like, if you're not doing it, your work is suffering.
Yeah.
So part of what I do is I have a social media blocking app that I give everyone in my, in the finishing school for writers to pick times when they don't have access to websites that distract them. I also use it for my work email on the weekends and after hours. And so what happens when I'm standing in line and I don't have social media that I can go to is I also have on my homepage of Safari on my phone, I have all the publications I want to be in. So that's, instead of 10 minutes where I'm just scrolling, that's 10 minutes where I read a particular article on the rumpus. It's just getting that in little by little and really making reading a big part of my life.
I know. Let's I'm gonna put links to your course material and things of that nature, and your online profiles in the YouTube description. But could you briefly or give sort of an overview for people that are just going to listen to it first before they go into the description of the names of some of the things that you offer?
Yeah, so my online writing group is called A Very Important Meeting, and my organizational software for writers is the Writers Mission Control Center. And if you want to do coaching, that's through the Finishing School for Writers.
And what platforms? I have an idea what the ones that I first noticed you on. But what platforms would you say are easiest for listeners or viewers to find that have heard this podcast?
Yeah, I'm most active on Instagram, and then you can also find me on my website, thatwriterpaulette.com.
Thanks. Well, again, I want to express my appreciation for having had you on. I don't like to use the same term for something 3 or 4 times, and it's like writing. I don't like to say thank or express appreciation. I like to vary it, because when I'm teaching people, I know that when you're learning writing, like when I'm looking at somebody's paper and they turn in like a travel piece or some type of other features. I'm talking about magazine features. The initial, when people haven't done a lot of it, they're going to use the same verbs and the same adjectives, because those are the ones that they would use in the everyday conversation. And so even when I'm talking to people, I try to say, I try to use a synonym for that thing, like the second or third time that I'm communicating the same thought, just to get that muscle memory, so that I don't get in the habit of saying thank or appreciate or gratitude, without sounding like, no, that one's not suited to the occasion. It's a little pompous. So I can't think of a fourth one. So we'll, I'm glad we had you on to inform our listeners and viewers.
Well, I really enjoy talking with writers anytime I get to, so I appreciate you having me on.
right, talk soon, and I'll let you know when we upload, and we'll definitely have all the links there.
Great. All right, I'll have Anita get you the recording.
Okay, bye bye.
All right, talk soon. Bye.